there aren't many places where people can go, and it is considered a bit ugly, a bit, that would look horrible. But to give somebody an opportunity to be able to get a load of frustrations out physically, then they're not going to have that same pain in their body, or not going to have to sort of act out in this way. Or most people numb it out with doom scrolling or Netflix or alcohol or whatever.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Big Chat. This is a very special episode for me, and I'm feeling a bit emotional actually as I say that. I'm going to be talking today to someone that has been very pivotal in my personal growth over the last few years, and certainly enlightened me in lots of ways and gave me lots of tools to deal with life. And that is Tim Laurence, and he, for those of you who don't know, he brought the Hoffman Process to the UK, and I was lucky enough to be on a journey on the Hoffman Process in 2019, and we'll talk more about that. And by pure fluke, I ended up with, as was described, the Hoff as my faculty teacher. And it just so turned out that he literally was the man that brought it from the United States over to the UK. So welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. Very happy to see you again.
I know. I mean, the last time you saw me, that's nearly 4 years ago, isn't it? So...
a lifetime ago, pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID, exactly, pre-COVID. So for those people that are listening, and I mean, I think most people that listen to this podcast know about, we've had some Hoffman Process. Rafe's been on here, who did the Hoffman Process with myself and has now gone on to flourish and launch his business, which is thriving.
Natural energy drinks,
yeah, Eco he's doing. And, I've kept in touch with a lot of people that I was on the process with. How would we describe the Hoffman Process to people that don't know anything about it? In a nutshell, if we can, Tim.
Right. I'll try it in a nutshell, but I'd love for you or for you to channel what other people say about it, because
I will.
A while ago since I did it. So as a person who now organizes it and puts it on, I'd say it's a week-long intensive where people come to let go of an old baggage, create some new space in their lives to see where they want to go.
Yeah. And how did the Hoffman Process find you? Before I talk a bit about my experience of it, how did it find you?
Well, word of mouth, but I was in with a clique of people, perhaps in California, people who emigrated there because they were interested in, what's all this new consciousness, blah, blah, blah about?
Yeah.
And people went in different directions, but we'd always come back and meet and talk about our experiences, whether it had been down at Esalen, or somebody did some meditation retreat, or somebody did something, came back from India, or somebody did some psychedelic drug experience. And the word on the street, it wasn't really the street, it was a comfortable living room. Just sounds edgy.
Sounds edgy. I like it.
Was that this was the most intensive experience you could have to clear out stuff and start a new chapter. And a lot of people were there because they had troubled pasts, I'd say, or they're very curious. So it found me, but also by then I was a bit jaded. I'd been living 8 or 10 years in California, and I'd tried many different things, and I was still the old cynical Englishman who was, more arrogant than others. But this somehow got through. So when I did it, it punched a way through the defenses, the iron gates over my heart and my soul that others hadn't been able to reach.
You trained under
the man,
under the main man. I mean, I was told I was meeting the Hoff when I came to the retreat back in 2019. There was like, the Hoff's here, and I was thinking, is this Mr. Hasselhoff?
Yes, Mr. Hasselhoff. And then you saw me without quite that Baywatch build.
I don't know. I'm not going to judge you on that, Tim. But you did actually train under.
Yeah, no, I was very fortunate. I was also fortunate because he'd been traveling. He'd been taking the process to Europe and to Australia for the 2 years before that. But it just happened to be midwinter, and he was back in California. And for whatever reason, he said, well, I'll come and teach this one. And he was my teacher. So then when I applied to teach, he was also back there, and I was the last person he fully trained, because after that he got ill and he wasn't going to be teaching much longer. So he was an incredible influence on me, and you can still feel the influence. I mean, it's called the Hoffman Process. It wasn't during his time, because he didn't want it to be called just after him. But you can feel his influence, that he was a man who went straight to the point, and he didn't do a lot of small talk or wishy-washy or, being paid by the hour. He said, right, we're going to get a lot done in a week.
Yeah. And I mean, and you do get a lot done in a week.
You remember.
I remember crying a lot and screaming a lot.
I was going to say, it's so nice to see your normal face smiling.
Well, not just like, oh my God, scream or punching things or, just no. I mean, it was, I didn't know what to expect. All I knew was I think the thing that shocks most people is it's like, there's no technology. There is no technology.
You give up your phone.
You give up your phone, don't you? You give up your phone, you give up your devices, and you're not allowed to communicate with the outside world. And I think for people like myself who work in certain industries, that's like sends fear through us. That
and it's got worse and worse, hasn't it?
Has it? Well, I suppose it has, yeah.
People have become so addicted to the phones, but it also is interesting. We got to a tipping point a couple of years ago where people were actually glad to have their phones in. And we do warn them. It's not like that scene in, did you see that 9 Perfect Strangers with Nicole Kidman, where an Instagram influencer, when she gets to the retreat, she has her phone taken away. Yes. No, it can't happen to me. We do warn people. And also, they can call their kids, or of
course they can,
midweek, or, if there's an emergency. But yeah, it's technology-free week. We don't do massive audio-visual. We just, have old-fashioned talks and experiences. But just coming back to what you're saying about sort of anger or crying and laughing and
release, I would call it.
The first part of it is, if we're depressed or anxious, there's just usually a lot of stored up emotions. So what is it that we need to get rid of that's very hard if we're on our phones or if we're chatting to people or managing the household budget or whatever? There's an awful lot of perhaps resentment from little things in the past that have accumulated, or grief from things that we've lost or people that we've lost, and that's the start of the week. We try to encourage people to be able to let that go. And
it's this. I mean, how many people would you say normally? Well, there was 24 of us. Was
yeah,
24
yeah,
of us?
It's 24 because we're limited. We choose to have one of us facilitators for each 8 clients or participants.
And I was lucky I got you, or you were lucky you got me.
Well, that's all you'll ever know. You can only do it once, and she'll never know. There are other better teachers around.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you certainly gave me a different perspective on things. I can remember you sort of saying to me, it's okay to be quiet. You don't have to always be like bouncing off the walls, which I certainly am renowned to be a bit of a bouncer off walls. But I think since the Hoffman process, less so. And it was an amazing experience, because I think for me to not have any outside influence at all, from just, I was able to totally submerge myself into it and totally apply myself to it. And that was a great gift for me at that time, because I came a year after my dad had passed away, and you do say as a rule, don't you, that it should be at least a year after losing anybody.
Yeah, it can't be too close, because then it would complicate things when we do things about, what do you resent about your parent? Well, if you've just had a bereavement, that's not going to fly very well.
Yeah, and there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that work where you really are looking at your parents. I mean, I can remember my mum, bless her, saying, and I had no idea of this, but before I actually went in to do the Hoffman process, she said, "You're never going to talk to me again." And I was like, what? Because I thought I was going in to deal with dad. I thought I was going in to sort of deal with my things around dad. But actually, it uncovers everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, at least your mother came out with her worst fear.
Yes,
straight
did,
away,
literally,
very honest.
She was very happy when she got a letter from me, and we were still friends at the end of it.
What I was going to say about, when I first heard about it, word of mouth, I think people said it's intense. It will put down all the stuff that you've had about the past. You won't have to deal in that way with, parents or family issues again. And so that's what we start with. We start with, how were you as a child? Were you rewarded for being the chatty performer? Were you rewarded for being the good girl who was always quiet in the background? And so on. What were the roles, or what were the roles that you rebelled against? So there's a lot of uncovering there that people might have had insights about, but I suppose we're providing a stage or a retreat place where people can really go into it.
And I mean, I think one of the most interesting parts of the process as well for me was when we had to be silent. I mean, that was interesting for me.
Interesting in quotes. Yeah.
Challenging. I mean, I think a certain friend of mine, Bobby, sort of trying to tell him he needed to come out of the shower without communicating. That was interesting, shall we say? But not communicate, to be with 24 people when you've been meditating, talking, journaling, all of these things, all of these different processes, and then to have that experience of being very quiet and not talking at all, that's very powerful.
Well, do you remember what it then prompted you into feeling or thinking or whatever?
Yes, I mean, it was, well, I mean, as you know, I became very close to Russia, who's a good friend of both of ours, and it was incredible because Russia was within our 8. But when there was that silence, we were just really drawn to each other. It was just like this magnetic pull that we hadn't spoken to each other before then. I'd seen this extremely glamorous Saudi turn up with all her luggage at the beginning, and she, like some beautiful princess, and then didn't think I'd talked to her in a million years. And then within that period, I was really, really drawn to her, and we just couldn't wait to start talking because we needed to talk. You energetically, I felt very drawn to people, and like I had a deeper understanding of who they were.
It's interesting because she's a very introspective. She presents very capable in the world, but she's a brilliant writer, and she's looking at the world from a very different perspective. So I guess you were attracted to each other as a balance of opposites, without suggesting that you're.
What are you saying, that I'm not a good writer? I wrote very well when I was in the Hoffman Process. I'll have you know,
a brilliant communicator.
Yes.
in up front and live.
Yeah.
But interesting. Yeah. So in the silence, you were attracted to her, but I hope in the silence, you and everybody were reflecting on the insights that you've had up to then and letting them build up.
Yeah, and you do. I mean, when I think back now, the work that we were doing, we were literally working. We'd also go to bed at a certain time, wouldn't we? We'd go to sleep at a certain time. We'd keep an eye on our sleep patterns, talk about what we dreamt about, and it was really was times of silence, times of meditation. It was incredibly intense.
It's quite a menu, I suppose. Yeah, because you were mentioning the bashing or the anger. You're mentioning crying a lot. Hopefully there's some laughter. There are chats amongst the group.
Oh, it was beautiful.
And humor. Then there are the still moments of quiet, of meditation. I think what we're trying to do there is saying we're much more than just the sum of our behavior patterns, or much more than our childhood role. What is it that we can reach in those moments of silence or gratitude? Gratitude is another thing that we're trying to evoke from people.
Yeah, because it's been going. How long has the Hoffman Process been going now?
It's been going for well over 50 years, actually.
It's amazing.
It's just 50 years as a group, but Bob was doing it in individual. It's hard to imagine one-to-one work, but he was doing that for the 5 years before. But in 72, it became a group, and then in 85, it became residential. Yeah.
Goodness me. And 50, that is a long time, isn't it? And so, and I mean, obviously without giving away your youthful looks here, Tim, how long have you been doing the Hoffman Process?
I've been doing it for 32 years. I qualified in 91. So yeah, it's exactly 32 years. And I did it in 89. My goodness. Yeah. I mean, there are people now who are 10 or more years younger. They weren't born for another 10 years before I did. Anyway,
I get that as well when I talk to guests, and I'm like, no, you can't be that young. It's just not possible at all. But what do you love about the work so much?
Going into somebody's story at a level that's very hard just in normal life. Being able to sit with them and know that without mobile phones, without distractions, we've got each other's attention for that week, and we can go exploring deeper and deeper levels of consciousness. Not just the negative stuff, but also the positive stuff, and making a balance of then what is it they want to make more out of life. So I suppose partly it's loving the intensity, but loving also the quietness that comes during that intense week, to be able to hopefully make a change in somebody's life. So it's dramatic work.
It is dramatic. When I came out of the Hoffman Process, it was like seeing the world with different glasses on. It really was. It was bizarre. I've never experienced anything like it since.
But were you able to build on that? Because the question of mine would be, if I was listening to this, is, well, great, you do an intensive week and you make friends and so on, and you laugh and cry. how do you build on that? How does it not just fade away?
Because you have to keep doing the work, because you have to, I mean, the great thing with the Hoffman process is that you're given tools to work with. You're given so much. There's so much now that you can do, isn't there? You've got the Hoffman's got an app that you can work with, but you've also got all the books that I've gone over my books and all the things that I was working on in the Hoffman process, maybe 3 or 4 times, I would say. And I think a lot of my fellow colleagues, students that were on the Hoffman process have done the same thing. They've revisited the work that we went
to review
over,
what you've
it.
done. And any particular practices like keeping a gratitude journal or journaling?
Gratitude journal, and I would say also I think one of my favourite ones was, and I can't think of the exact term, but it's when you get hold of a feeling and you change it into something else. You visualize it and you change it into something else. That's the technique.
We call that recycling.
Recycling. Yeah. That's probably was one of the most powerful things that I experienced on the Hoffman process, that you could actually change the way you feel. And also, since doing the Hoffman process and then learning NLP coaching, because that was definitely what drew me to wanting to learn more about NLP coaching, and also hypnosis. I'm fascinated by hypnosis, and I'm going to be revisiting that in August and training to do that again, because I find that so powerful, working with the mind. And I feel like there were moments of hypnosis going on throughout that process, and where we were just in a trance that was amazing, because you go so introspective into yourself. It's just like nothing else. I'd never experienced anything like that. I've been a yoga teacher for 12 years, but I'd never experienced anything on that level of depth within my. There's no hiding. You can't hide from yourself. You won't let us, for starters. It's like, all bets are off. You've got to come, and you've got to bring everything. Otherwise, there's no point doing it. And everyone is totally committed. But I think the recycling. I think also when we did the technique where we would sit opposite someone and talk about. Quite often someone, when they're triggering us, or something's being triggered in us, it's not actually that person, it's something in ourselves.
What we call transference, which sort of looks like a sort of a part of projection, but what we're saying is we're transferring from the past an image, a memory, a sensation that we had from our parents, like being put down or being criticized or whatever. It's not actually happening. That person is just being themselves, giving you a distracted look. But we transfer the past. Oh no, you're doing that. So that's what we have. Yeah, you talk out. And
that was really interesting, because, as you know, one of my friends, she did the process in California. She's been on the Big Chat, and she did the process in California, and then she literally came to the UK and opened my laptop and went, "You're doing it. You are doing it now." She was like,
no pressure.
I don't quite how to take that, but it was good for me.
I hope it was done with love rather than frustration.
It was definitely done with love. But she, we both talked about that whole sort of experience, but especially the transference, when you have to write down if there's anyone in the room that kind of triggers you. And that, again, I had periods, as you know, where you take things personally. If you've grown up in a certain way, sometimes you can take things personally, and so you're having to hold space for people's real vulnerabilities on that process. I don't know how you guys did it, and you did it with so much humour and love and warmth as well.
Well, we do leave it to the sort of almost the last day, I think. Because we know that people, if we did it on the first day, it would be just overwhelming. It would be it would put everybody into the defensiveness. So we've done a lot of work before that. And we want people to remember it with humor. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. If somebody says, "I've had this feeling about you, it's my stuff, but I just want you to know." Because depending on how we've grown up, we might have grown up with a lot of shame, a lot of criticism. "Oh, I'm awful. You look at me like that."
Yeah. And can we talk about the bashing?
Yeah, sure.
Can we?
It's all in the book.
I know, it's all in the book. There's a great book out called The Hoffman Process, who was written by Tim Laurence, who is sitting here right now. Who said earlier, "Oh, there's a book about it." And I said, "Yes, which you've written," but he's very humble, so he didn't want to say anything.
I know. I think it comes from also traveling, and people they say, "Well, don't you have a copy of your book?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm not one of those who flings it around here. Read my book."
I have my signed copy of your book, Tim. I still have. I should have brought it in. I should have put it propped it here. We could have had that. But
better have looked read. I've seen some copies people present. They've never been opened.
It's very much been read. It's a brilliant book. Oh. But the bashing, I think, for me personally, was the most powerful thing that I've ever done.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I have suppressed a lot of anger, I would say, I would argue, or a lot of frustration that energetically I'd obviously held onto in my body. And I've been, as a child, very good at being quite chameleon-like and adapting to different situations and having to tread on eggshells. So I was always second-guessing, quite hyper-vigilant as a child, I would say. And with that has come a lot of not knowing what's mine and what's other people's. And bashing, for those that don't know, is basically we get a baseball bat. We're all given a baseball bat, and you bash the living daylights, not out of each other, but you bash the living daylights out of a pillow. And it's
I mean,
intense.
it's designed, as you say, to let go of a lot of frustrations. By the way, the baseball bat is plastic and lightweight. It's not one a wooden club.
I remember it being like metal. I don't know what you're talking about. The way my arm felt after 20 minutes of it.
Well, there was
like
obviously a little bit of anger going on there that you were able, but
Possibly.
hopefully. From it, you were able to draw a border between, what was acceptable and what was unacceptable.
Oh my
Some
God,
kind of
yeah.
line in the sand. That's what it was, aiming for.
It amazed me how much needed to be released. I think that to hold on, the amount you hold on to in your physical body, the amount of whether it's trauma or whether it's preconceived ideas or all of the amount that I was holding on to that I'd not let out, and it also. It's come out at certain times when I've been less in control, and I sort of I recognised the shout. I recognised it, and it's not one that I like to hear.
And it's a historic anger, isn't it? It's been piled up over the years. No, it's interesting that you brought it up, because honestly, I ask around, and even rehab centres don't do anger work anymore. I don't know if they can't get the insurance for it or something. It's a risk. We've been doing it a long time, so we know how to manage it, but there aren't many places where people can go, and it is considered a bit ugly, a bit, that would look horrible. But to give somebody an opportunity to be able to get a load of frustrations out physically, then they're not going to have that same pain in their body, or not going to have to sort of act out in this way. Or most people numb it out with doom scrolling or Netflix or alcohol or whatever.
Honestly, Netflix has come up so many times this morning on a few podcasts.
Really?
Yeah, or numbing out to TV. And I mean, I certainly stopped drinking 7 months ago now. So I've not been drinking now for 7 months. And that's kind of it. I'm done with it. I'm at that place now where it just doesn't serve me at all. It just makes me unhappy. But you are right, because if it's used as a medicinal purposes, it's not, for those that can have a drink and have a nice glass of wine and a jolly old chat, then great. But if you're using it for medicinal purposes, i.e. I don't want to be stressed out, I'm going to have a few glasses of wine, forget about it, I don't think it's quite as advisable. And I think that's what you're talking about with zoning out and checking out with Netflix as well.
I would say self-medicating rather than medicinal. Medicinal in air quotes, in case you weren't watching this live, there were air quotes by part of the presenter. Yeah, to get out of it. And I guess it did what it did while you were younger and needed it, and now you realise it doesn't serve you at all.
Doesn't serve a purpose.
It gives you a very negative
effect. Yeah. And I think with the certainly with the actual energetic shift that I felt in my body, doing that, bashing the pillow, that was for it's hard to explain when you know someone that has probably maybe in the past used alcohol as a bit of a prop. So as many people do, I know that when you go out, it gives you more confidence, or you think it gives you more confidence. There was another thing that we did where we all just danced. We all just danced in the room, and that is some people can have real inhibitions about how they're seen, how they're looked at, how they're viewed. And certainly for me, myself, in the past, put a few drinks in me and I'll be dancing up and down on the table. But without a few drinks in me, I'm actually a bit of an introvert extrovert. And that revealed that to me on that process. I didn't really realise that about myself. You saw it in me because you were like, Coco, you don't always have to be like.
Well, I think
loud.
I was encouraging you to explore the other side, because if one pattern has been overplayed, we say play the other side. But the other bit is there's bound to be an equal and opposite reaction. There's bound to be an inner, quieter place that you're seeking, as well as the one where you've been rewarded for performing.
Yeah.
And by the way, we'd never want in the Hoffman process or anything to take out that essence in you, which is a wonderful talker. It's the big chat. It's the Chatty Hatter company, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're using that well, but you can use it with conscience and have quiet moments also.
Yeah, and learning to have quiet moments and also I think when I came out of the process, synchronicities of life, that was just unbelievable. I mean, it's just like you're suddenly just tuned in. That's the only way I can describe it. I mean, everything seemed brighter, the sky seemed bluer, it was like an appreciation, a gratitude for where you are, and just a liberation where you just I was so happy when I came. It was like knowing that everything was going to be okay, and that fundamental thing where all human beings, we just really want to be seen and loved. It's that real
seen, heard, and loved. Yeah,
seen, heard, and loved
as children, as adults. Any particular synchronicities you can remember, or more sense of awe at everything there was?
Well, I mean, Russia won't mind me saying this, but we funny synchronicities when we came out. We spent a few days together after the Hoffman process, and we were down in Brighton. And as we were walking through, pretty much everything we wanted, we just manifested.
Really?
It appeared in front of us, including a very nice avocado on sourdough. That we were walking up some steps, and I said, "Oh, I really fancy some avocado and sourdough." And then there at the top of the steps, on the window, was a sign for avocado on sourdough. It could have been anything, but it was there. And then we'd go somewhere, and we wanted to have a parking space, and there was never going to be one, and it would just appear, and it was like life was just aligned. And we had amazing. A lot of that, and it was getting to the point. My ring, actually, that I'm wearing today, my amethyst ring, I said to Russia in Brighton after the Hoffman process, I said, I really want a pinky ring, and I want it with an amethyst, and I want it with diamonds. And we went into the lanes, and near a shop that I'd worked in years ago with another fellow who'd done the Hoffman process, there was this little pinky ring in the window.
Oh my goodness.
And I went in and I tried it on, and not only did I try it on and it fitted, but the chap was called the same name as Russia's father's boat.
Really?
Yeah. And then he said to me, and guess what? The ring is half price today.
Really?
Yes.
Goodness. You had to have it.
It was just we were just sort of like pinching ourselves, because we were like, is this happening? But it just felt like everything was very aligned. And I've had that feeling again, many times, fortunately, where things have just felt, when you are aligned, it just feels like things happen. They flow very naturally. And where there's more resistance, it's learning to navigate that.
Or when we're in our, what they now call the default modal network, the system where we're often in, we won't notice, we'll be worrying about this or that, will I get a parking fine, or, did I put enough money in or something? And we'll miss that amethyst ring.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll miss all of that. Makes me think of doing a Hoffman week, so you can better enjoy Brighton.
Listen, I've done it twice. I manifested this ring as well. I went down there and manifested this one. So I think there's something going down there. I always seem to manifest joy when I go down there. But it is that being open to opportunities, isn't it? And being open to.
Everything comes down to, whatever method you do, whatever method you study, or whatever religion or tradition, it all comes about appreciating the present.
Yeah.
And this, for me, was a journey that took me to India for a year when I was in my early 20s. And I thought, meditation, levitation, invoking the name of Ram will help all this. But all it comes down to is getting rid of the noise in your head. Yeah. So for me, a Western approach where it meets a bit of spirituality was great in Hoffman, because I needed to get the noise out of my head, the noise of, being overeducated in certain ways, undereducated in others, but worrying about this or regretting the past. And that's what helps us be in the present.
Yeah.
It sounds so simple, but for most of us, there's too much chatter going on.
There is too much chatter, and I think so much of us do live in the past or in the future, and actually you've got no control over either of those things. That's all you can. Even this moment's just gone.
This moment and that one.
And we could go on and on and on and on, couldn't we? Do you have a lot of people that come onto the process that then go on to work as facilitators? I would imagine you do.
It's funny because there's a sort of a joke. People say, "Oh, in our group, just about 80% wanted to go on and be Hoffman facilitators," but it's a very rigorous process. And when people realise, that they'll have to give up a week from home or from wherever they're living, and they can't do it when they've got kids growing up, or that it's that intense, or the amount of time they have to give up for their training, because the training is not like a part-time masters or whatever. You have to be there week after week, and in between you're having to do a lot. So there's, I suppose, a natural sieving process or thinning out process.
Well, you do a natural sieving process before people can even come in, because I remember it was pretty extensive, the level of information that I had to write down before getting accepted.
And you still got through.
And I still got through. I did something right, but I can remember there's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot that you ask of
I mean, partly we're doing that because we are taking a risk with people.
Yeah.
We're taking a risk with people to sort of, put it all out there. We're taking a risk with people where they're so much out of their comfort zone, even, not having their own bedroom, not having their own news feed come through. So we asked people, firstly, there's a very short, it's only 7 pages for us. It's short medical therapy history questionnaire, food and all the basics.
Yeah.
And if we pick anything up from that, we might ask for more information about them. We might ask what type of therapy they've had. If they haven't had any and it's a presenting issue like around trauma or abuse, we'll say, well, could you, have some therapy first?
Yeah.
Or as you mentioned, if there's too close a bereavement.
Yeah.
Or something too major has gone on where we think people are too distracted, that we want them to be able to be present for their past rather than present for just the person who, shut the door on them yesterday and said, I never want to see you again. And then the second part, in fact, I'm just reading them this week as I'm going into a course starting on Saturday, is people write. Do you remember how long it took you? Because we reckon about 8-10 hours or so.
Oh my God, easily that.
Yeah.
Easily.
So it's
10. 10 hours.
Autobiographical work.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a lot of guided questions, but people take their time on looking at, well, I've never really thought, how did my parents' attitudes to anger or sadness or criticizing or basically their relationships, or how were they with money? We're looking at all of that, and then we're asking people to fill in, their own biography, how it's affected them or what's going on now, and also what they want to get out of it. So we have a pretty good idea of what people have had in their past and what they want to deal with, so we can jump in the deep end rather than saying, so tell me a bit about, what brings you here. Yeah. So I'll read all of that and I'll have that in the back of my mind when I then go to work with people. So that sieves people out. If people don't want to do that, so I can't be bothered, well then I think you'll find the week probably is something.
It's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so, and we're also in a fortunate position. We have always had more people want to do it than we can really cater for. So, we're able to say to people that we don't think this is for you right now.
Yeah. And you can only do it once.
Yeah, we say...
Why can you only do it once, Tim?
Why would you want to do it again?
I'd want to do it again. I think
because we feel it's not just a therapy, it's a ritual. It's a rite of passage. A rite of passage for sort of giving up. They say for the smart arse, 21st century, but actually we're in a different century. For people who've been overeducated, it's a rite of passage from giving up something that's sort of the irresponsible teenager or even younger to becoming an adult and taking responsibility. And we're doing that with very strong images about how you grew up, letting go of your past, imagining death. Some pretty strong
there is.
in the middle of the week. So for you to do it again, you wouldn't have that element of surprise. Your intellect would be engaged at a level. Oh, wait a minute! I remember how I did this before. So now if I do that, what we want to do is shock people away from their default thinking modes and get them into something else, and then be able to make a change from that. And we do 3-day weekends and things to help people freshen up and say, come with certain specific issues, but not the whole shebang.
You couldn't repeat it again, could you? I mean, I'd just like to do it again because I just loved that week. For me, it was just if not one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Oh.
I really would say so, because it was dramatically life-changing for me.
That's so good to hear, because for some people, we're programmed to survive by remembering the negatives. And so some people remember, oh my God, it was so hard. I mean, I loved it at the end, but it was so hard. I'd never want to do it again. So it's very sweet that you remember the good times as well. I mean, there is some good
it was painful,
play
but
and laughter and dancing.
I mean, there was a lot
of
laughter. I mean, there was a lot of laughter. I mean, just can't go anywhere if there's not laughter, and you're the same. But it was just so revolutionary for me to just I thought I had a level of self-awareness before I went there. I just didn't have any at all.
Well, you had a lot. I mean, you've been 12 years a yoga teacher. You've done lots of other stuff. You must have had some, but I think it's able to look at areas that perhaps our mind or our awareness hasn't yet gone to.
And also I would say some of the work that I found really, really amazing was when you had to put yourself into your parents' shoes and imagine their lives. When people talk about channeling, I would say some crazy stuff was going on that week with me where I was channeling things.
You were really able to be there.
I just knew. You just know. It's just a phenomenal thing where you just suddenly go, oh my God, that's because of that. And it's like a light bulb moment.
Do you remember why we do it? Why do we have people walk in their parents' shoes?
So that we can forgive them, and so that we can understand that actually it's a lot of it's not their fault. It's just something that's been passed down to them, possibly. I mean, a lot of everything is a pattern that's been passed down and passed down and passed down. And we're, I would say, almost like the crusaders that break those patterns, because I certainly feel like I broke some patterns when I went in there that I would just by default end up repeating. However much I ran the other direction, if I had not done the work that I'd done in Hoffman, I just would have repeated a lot of patterns. They were already starting to happen.
Brilliant answer. You notice how I cleverly became the question.
I did notice how you're doing that a few times, Tim. I'm fully aware of that, and I don't mind that at all. I mean, we can make this the Tim podcast if you want. I'm very happy for that. I think
I'd be the
glorious.
questioner. You be the answer. Just reversing. For me, it's a bit easier, but for you, if you're always the questioner, it might be quite relaxing to occasionally give the answers. But I wanted to ask that because for somebody listening, they think, well, why would I need to be in my parents' shoes?
Yeah.
And you did it spot on. It's about understanding and forgiveness.
Yeah.
We may think of our parents as all beings, all powerful, who are always adults. But if we have to imagine them as children, if we have to imagine for a few hours just walking in their shoes, seeing the home they grew up in, seeing the expression of their parents' eyes, it might not have been easy for them. It might have been harder for them than it was growing up for us. And then therefore we can understand how patterns of behavior like perfectionism or victim or always, having to even be the rebel, how they started out way back.
And also I remember doing a lot of work around how we can create these scenarios where, like, for example, I hate Christmas, I always have a bad Christmas, and then you almost set yourself up every time you get near Christmas,
of course,
to have a bad Christmas. So it's like you're basically making it happen to reassure yourself that what's happening is well, I'm right. It's always rubbish Christmas, or I'm just using Christmas as an example. Everyone probably has a lovely Christmas, but certain things come up, don't they, like that?
It might be
birthdays,
birthday for some people, or people's weddings or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I know that you said that you've been very interested in hypnosis and in NLP.
Yeah.
And so you obviously had an interest in, well, what is the script that we write?
Yes.
And so NLP and hypnotherapy go directly into, changing your script, going away about it. And we get there, but we do say, well, we might have to do some weeding first, because you might have had some rough Christmases. We need to sort of deactivate that, because Bob Hoffman's whole thing was about, we learn this stuff emotionally and we have to let go of it emotionally, hence the, extremes of emotions that people might experience during the Hoffman week. So in order to, have a different attitude about Christmas, you might have to have a good rant and rage or cry about Christmases past.
I think I had a few rants and raves. I think so. Would you say that, I mean, in the 30 years or so that you've been doing that in the UK, I mean, 30 years ago must have been very different to have been brought a process like this over and been met differently, or would you say it's always been?
I mean, it was really interesting. It's funny because I'm hearing Prince Harry's interviews over the last few months and how he said it was very different then. Now people talk about therapy. I'd had the advantage of being in California where it was such a normal thing, and I was living in the States for 15 years or so. But yes, I do remember that people had all kinds of questions. Well, it's therapy. It's from California. I don't want to talk about my feelings. It was a struggle. I mean, for the first 5 or 6 years, we were wondering, is this ever going to take here? But then, again, to every action an equal and opposite reaction, and the repressed English really need this stuff. The people who we think are more uptight, they love to dance. So if you give them a chance to dance, they will dance. If you give them a chance to rant and rage and talk about the past, they'll go for it. So it was in reaction to the repression that eventually became popular, but it had to be, kind of quiet. It had to be sort of underground for a bit. And somebody once said it might not be mainstream, but it's deep stream.
Yeah.
And now I think it is more accepted. It's this therapy is now fairly mainstream.
Yeah.
Journalists talk about it, TV presenters talk about it. Certainly all kinds of celebrities, as soon as they get into trouble, saying, well, I'm going to go and work on myself.
I do find now that more and more people, as I said to you, people that I've spoken to, they are much more open to this kind of one of the things that we did there, which I hope is okay for me to share, was when you imagined yourself at the end of your life. That is a very powerful thing. And the fact that you have a choice, the fact that you actually have a choice of paths almost, that, do you want to take the path where you're surrounded by loved ones and you're surrounded by people that care about you and you feel good about who you are, or do you want to, go the other road? And there is a choice. And I think that is the power of you have to explore yourself if you want that. If you don't look at yourself, you can't control anything other than your own behavior. No one human being can control another human being's people.
Well, it's automatic. It's overlearned. It's compulsive. Yeah. And if it's driven by emotion, we'll never bring the rational logic to it. Yeah. So we all need to step back and see what it is that we want. And you're remembering, the specific thing where we say, exaggerate the differences. Yeah. Do you want to go on and make this even worse? And it will be worse if you just go on, because you accumulate more years of misery. Or do you want to see yourself surrounded in this way, even if you don't know exactly what's going to happen? If you imagine that, then doors will open. And they do open.
I mean, they do. I mean, take Rafe, for example. He had an amazing experience when he came out of doing the Hoffman. We went for dinner, a few of us, and he was sort of, he'd had these blocks around doing things that were unblocked, and it really did unblock. For me, it was like, wow, I can actually be happy. I don't have to be a clapping monkey all the time. I can actually be happy, and I can be quiet, and I can be all sorts of things.
No, for both you and Rafe, it gives me chills to hear that, because funny enough, the first lockdown I spent was in deep rural Devon, and I was at a picnic, outdoors, obviously not a party.
Obviously outdoors.
And there were people there of Rafe's age, and they said, oh, I've met somebody who did the Hoffman Process, and he said it completely changed him, and he started this business, and he's so different. I thought, that's nice, because these are people who, in my context, would never otherwise, touch therapy or have heard of it. They actually had a happy family background too.
Yeah.
So good on Rafe, yeah.
It, and I think for everyone, it is consistency. You have to consistently work on it, because I think some people do sort of come out and there's almost like that pink cloud of wow, everything's amazing. If you don't continue to do the work on yourself, then you understandably that pink cloud is going to burst sooner or later. You have to keep putting the work in. That's my experience of it. I would say, is that your experience? Very
wise words. Can I interest you in joining the Hoffman Facilitator training program?
It's funny, and I mean, my dear friend Andrew, who I know did the Hoffman Process 20 years ago, or God, even 30 years ago. As soon as I came out of the Hoffman Process, he said, "So when are you going to be a Hoffman Facilitator?" And I was like, "What?" And he was like, and that was before I'd even started coaching. But it definitely inspired me to want to coach and to want to work with people, and probably inspired this, talking to people about all the things that are available for us to make ourselves feel better and be better versions of who we are.
You're an inspiring voice to the world. But I was playing partly in response to you saying that, you have to work it. It works if you work it. You have to build a practice, as with anything, as with gratitude, as with looking at with joy, as with appreciating what we have around with us. Build a practice, because I think we're in a society that wants a magic wand or a magic pill. I do that 7 days, or I take this antidepressant and everything will be fine. No, we've got to keep actually being active. It's called being a human.
And actually saying that's another thing to point out, is that you're quite strict about people, that we're not allowed to be medicated before you go in, and also you can't exercise when you're there, can you?
No, we
That's
say
an
that.
interesting
No,
one.
because there are exerciseaholics, who go
Yeah.
running and get their adrenaline going, or
Yeah.
dopamine or whatever. No, we're saying, hey, bring all of that, whatever tension you have and you take out there, bring it into this. If people are on medication, we're not going to interfere with that, but we're saying, don't
Not yet.
smoke a joint or whatever in the breaks.
I mean, I don't think smoking a joint would have been conducive with Hoffman. Well, it would have been, but it would
It's
have
such
taken
a
it
chill week, man. It's totally.
I mean, I do remember we all liked smoking cigarettes because that was the only thing we were allowed to do. We were all. I remember we were all smoking. I think even Bobby was rolling cigarettes at one point. We were all having them round the fire because that was the only thing we were allowed to do, because we do all act like children, don't we?
We
as
don't
grown-ups.
we don't ban smoking because we figured it would be just another huge stress for people. They've got enough stresses, but we've also noticed that the smokers attract a bit of a crowd because they're so cool. And can I come and join you? So we have some break from the tension. It's not all so serious.
But it's beautiful. And are you still doing the Hoffman process at Seaford House?
Well,
Florence
funny enough, no, not this year. But we there may be a chance for us buying it. So we may
You're
maybe
joking.
go. We don't know. We're turning into a charity this year, and that may make things very different for funding and stuff. So we're
That's amazing.
hoping to be able to buy our own site, and obviously Florence House is
Florence
top of that
House is
list.
so beautiful.
Set on the cliffs of Seaford Head, overlooking the sea. It is a gorgeous site, and we've been there for 22 years.
I have gone down and attempted the Seven Sisters, maybe managed two of the sisters, but 6 o'clock every morning I would get up with my two R's, Robert and Bobby, and go up for walks with Russia, and we'd quite often see you jetting up and down there because you seem to be able to do it a lot faster than anyone else.
Well, also
Tim.
I know it's the only exercise I'll get. You may be bashing pillows or whatever. I've just got to be standing in front of the room pretending to be a wise person.
I did like the fact that we were allowed to go back that day that we did do the pillow bashing, and you said to everybody, we'll leave the bats in the room in the morning, and if anyone wants to go back in and have another go, feel free. And I was straight back in.
You were there. Okay.
I was there. Myself and another fellow were in there, and we were like bashing away. And but for me, that did really demonstrate how much energetically you can hold on to things into your body.
Yeah. Well, you have a lot of life force flowing through you. Other
Yeah.
people might have said, bashing, no thanks, I'll stay in bed.
But also, I even mentioned to a friend the other day who needed to get some energy out of them. I was like, and this was something that you said in the Hoffman process, scream into your pillow, like shout into it, like literally shift it. Get it energetically, get it out.
We're a sedentary society that holds it in, and it isn't how we're meant to be. So yeah, get it out as long as it's a safe place and doesn't annoy the neighbours.
So you're going to be a charity. That's phenomenal. I think that's well deserved.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And when will that be happening?
This year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we're putting things in place. We need to sign the documents and do all the forms and stuff. But yeah.
Well, it's well deserved, because I can only imagine how many people. I mean, how many people do you think you've probably helped?
Around the world, it's sort of 130,000. So it's still not a massive
That's a massive
movement.
amount, Tim.
And in the UK, it's sort of over 10,000, 12,000 or so.
That's amazing.
So it's a good beginning. Yeah, if we become a charity, things become a lot easier to go bigger on, I think.
They do, yeah. And you, on my word, if you had Florence House, that would be amazing. And if you've done the Hoffman process, you can go back and visit sometimes, can't you? If you're allowed.
Yeah, the during COVID we had to shut it down. I think we're opening it up again now. On the last evening, there's a nice dinner, and people talk about their experience, and people who've come before can come back and sit in one of the last meditations and then have a dinner and talk about their experience if they want to. So it's sort of a gradual phasing of the real world back into the retreat space, where people meet others from outside. Yeah,
I might have to come along and do that.
Well, but one of the sites we're using, I think, is very close to here.
Is it?
Yeah.
We might need to have a chat about this afterwards.
Oh, we can indeed.
Well, it's been so good to talk to you. I can't believe I'm sitting opposite you. I feel incredibly grateful for everything that you and the Hoffman process gave to me, and everyone that was facilitating on that amazing week, and just the amazing people that I met. And every time I see geese fly over my house, I think of
an image of the geese, a flock holding each other together.
Yeah,
it's been very easy chatting with you because you're such a good host. You really know how to keep a conversational flow going.
Thanks. thanks. I mean, you did sort of have to shut me up a few times in the Hoffman process. So it was like, yeah, okay, Coco, you've just said enough now. So thank you for saying that so eloquently. I'll take that one definitely with me. But well, you go back to your beautiful hills and in Seaford by the sea, and I shall continue interviewing. But it's been an absolute pleasure to revisit again with you today. And I might have to get my book out, and I've still got my drawings. I did. So.
It's been a real pleasure for me, and thanks for having such very clear memories of doing Hoffman 4 years ago.
No, I can't recommend it highly enough to anyone. And that, actually, on that, before we go, what's the best way for people to find out about it? It's just to Google it, isn't it? Because you will find that some people think the Hoff, like David Hasselhoff or a certain other Hoff,
or the other Wim Hof, yeah,
who we love,
get
but you know,
out of that, yeah. No, HoffmanInstitute.co.uk. Google the Hoffman process.
Yeah.
You'll find it, and then everybody has to have an enrollment chat before doing it. You know, they have at least half an hour with one of our people just to hear if it's right for them, and
which is lovely, by the way. That was a really amazing conversation I had with someone. I think to have someone be so thorough in the beginning, it installs a confidence in you into what you're going into, because it is a big deal, and it's a big investment of time and energy, but it's so worth it. I mean, for me, it was the start of a healing process that's, it was a long time coming. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. All right, Tim. Okay. Thank you.